case we have never met, I'm Michael Price, and I want to help you succeed in growing your business.
Welcome, I'm Michael Price, your host.
And I'm Nancy, your co-host.
Welcome back to the Deep Dive. I want to start today by asking you to imagine a scenario. It's a little heavy, but stay with me here because it really sets the stage for everything we're going to talk about today. Imagine you are injured doing your job.
Okay.
And I'm not talking about a paper cut or a mildly sprained ankle. I mean a serious life-altering injury that is going to fundamentally affect how you walk or how you sleep or how you think for the rest of your life.
I'm picturing it. It's a pretty terrifying thought.
Now imagine your employer, let's just say it's a massive monolithic corporation, has this policy, a promise really, and they say, if you get hurt working for us, we will take care of you. We'll pay for your health care, and we will compensate you for that loss of function. That sounds like the ideal social contract, doesn't it?
It really does. I mean, it sounds like exactly what workers' compensation is supposed to be in a perfect world. You give your health for the job, and the job supports you afterward.
Exactly, but now here's the twist. To get that compensation, to actually get that promise fulfilled, you have to navigate a bureaucracy that is so complex, so riddled with specific legal codes and medical terminologies and administrative hurdles that a huge percentage of people just fail on their first try.
Wow.
They get denied, and not because they aren't actually injured, but because they didn't fill out, say, Form 21526EZ correctly, or maybe they didn't use the magic words more likely than not in a doctor's note.
And suddenly that promise feels a lot less like a safety net and a lot more like a maze.
Precisely, a maze. And in this maze, the exit isn't just about getting a plaque or a thank you card for the people trapped in it. Finding the exit determines whether they can pay their mortgage. It determines if they get free health care for their families. It determines their financial stability for decades.
We are talking, of course, about veterans.
We are wading into the incredibly murky, incredibly high-stakes waters of veteran disability claims because this isn't just paperwork. The sources make it clear this is a life-changing benefit system that has spawned an entire massive ecosystem around it.
And usually, when you have high stakes mixed with high complexity, you get a market. People will gladly pay for a guide to get them out of a maze like that.
Right, and that is the exact paradox we are exploring today because the government actually provides free help. Billions of dollars go into the Department of Veterans Affairs.
Mm-hmm.
Congress has literally chartered organizations specifically to help veterans for free.
Yep.
Yet despite all that free help sitting right there, there is a booming multi-million-dollar shadow industry of private consultants.
It's the Wild West. That is really the only way the sources describe the current state of affairs. You have the official sanction system, and then you have this massive unregulated frontier operating right alongside it.
So here is our mission for this deep dive. We are going to unpack the machinery of veteran representation. We're going to meet the cast of characters. We've got the claim sharks, the education companies, and the old guard, the VSOs.
And we have a really fascinating news hook for this, too.
Yes, exactly. A legal bombshell out of Louisiana involving something called the Plus Act, which really exposes just how broken this whole system is.
That Louisiana ruling is absolutely crucial to this discussion. It sounds like boring legal jargon, the Plus Act, but it actually tears the cover off the whole industry. It forces us to ask, what is the actual difference between being accredited by the government and being competent at your job? And why did a federal judge essentially say that telling veterans, hey, you can get this for free, is a lie?
That's a bold claim, a lie.
A constitutional violation of free speech rooted in a lack of factual basis. It's a completely fascinating ruling, and we are definitely going to break it down. But before we get to the courtroom drama, we have to understand the baseline. We have to understand how this machine is supposed to work in theory.
Okay, let's start there. Let's start with the congressional mandate, because if you read the brochure from Congress, or if you listen to basically any politician speak on Memorial Day, a veteran shouldn't have to pay a single dime to get their benefits right.
That is the absolute bedrock principle. The whole philosophy is that a veteran has already paid their dues through their service. They paid it with their time, their health, sometimes their sanity. So the government argues that since the veteran has already paid the ultimate price, they shouldn't have to open their wallet to access the compensation they're rightfully owed.
So to make that happen, Congress didn't just say, good luck and walk away. They built a system.
They did. They chartered specific organizations to act as the bridge between the veteran and the VA. We call them VSOs, Veteran Service Organizations.
And I think most people, when they hear VSO, they have a very specific image pop into their head.
Oh, absolutely. Probably a dimly lit hall, cheap beer, bingo nights, and guys wearing those garrison hats with the pins on them.
Exactly. The VFW, which is the Veterans of Foreign Wars or the American Legion.
And those social aspects are a huge part of their history and community value. But legally, under Title 38 of the U.S. Code, they are much more than that. They are congressionally chartered.
Meaning what, practically?
That means the federal government has officially recognized them as the conduit for helping veterans. But I want to specifically highlight one group that often gets overlooked by the general public, but is absolutely massive in this specific space, and that's the DAV.
The Disabled American Veterans.
Right. The DAV is a powerhouse. Unlike some of the other groups that might focus more on community events or lobbying for general veteran issues, the DAV is laser-focused on the claims process. They exist basically to help disabled veterans get their compensation. They are funded to do this, and they do not charge the veteran.
So practically speaking, if I'm a listener and I walk into a DAV office or a VFW post tomorrow, who am I actually talking to?
You are talking to a service officer. This is a person who has been trained, vetted, and crucially accredited by the VA to file claims on a veteran's behalf.
We really need to pause on that word, accredited. It appears in every single document, every court ruling, and every article we read for this deep dive. It's like the magic password. What does VA-accredited actually mean? Is it like being a board-certified surgeon, or is it more like having a driver's license?
It's somewhere in between, but probably much closer to a driver's license that comes with a background check. Let's dial it back and look at the mechanics of it. Accreditation in this context is managed by the VA's Office of General Counsel, the OGC.
Okay, the lawyers.
Right, the lawyers. To become accredited, you first have to pass a background check. So they check to make sure you aren't a felon, that you have quote-unquote good moral character.
So they screen out the obvious bad actors right out of the gate.
Yes. And then you have to pass a written exam regarding the regulations. You have to prove you actually know the basics of Title 38.
So there is a competency bar. You have to know the rules of the game.
There is a knowledge bar, yes. But the most important part of accreditation isn't really just passing the test. It's the access and the oversight that comes with it. When you are an accredited VSO representative, you get digital keys to the kingdom. You get access to the VBMS.
The Veterans Benefits Management System.
Exactly. The VA's internal computer system. An accredited rep can log in and see the veteran's actual file in real time. They can see the medical records the VA has pulled. They can see the exact status of the claim on the rater's desk. That is a massive advantage.
I can imagine you aren't just guessing what the VA is thinking.
Right. And crucially, being accredited means you are subject to oversight. If an accredited rep scams a veteran or acts unethically or fails to represent them properly, the VA can strip them of that accreditation. There is a direct chain of accountability.
And the price tag for this service, for the background check, trained officer, the direct access to the VBMS, the official filing?
Zero. Nothing at all. Federal law actively prohibits VSOs from charging the veteran for filing that initial claim. They are funded through their memberships, private donations, and indirectly through their congressional charter status, which actually gives them free office space inside VA hospitals.
Plus, you also have state agencies doing this, right? Like the Louisiana Department of Veterans Affairs, since we are going to be talking about Louisiana later.
Exactly. Almost every state, and honestly most counties, have some version of this. You have county service officers who are literally paid by local property taxes to sit in an office Monday through Friday and help veterans file claims for free.
And they were backed by the IRS, and they had direct access to the IRS computer system. Why on earth would you go down the street and pay a guy named Steve $10,000 to do it?
That is the multi-million-dollar question right there. On paper, it makes absolutely zero sense. In a perfectly functioning market, the free option that is high quality should immediately drive the expensive option out of business.
So why hasn't it?
Because of what the sources call the abundance problem, or more accurately, the total lack of abundance.
Meaning there just aren't enough of these service officers to go around.
It is a massive supply and demand imbalance. Think about the sheer number of veterans in the country. We have millions of veterans, and right now a huge portion of them are filing claims under new legislation like the PACT Act, which covers toxic burn pit exposure. The system is just absolutely flooded.
So the lines are long.
The lines are incredibly long, and the distribution of help is entirely uneven. It is basically a geography lottery.
Give me an example of how that plays out for you.
Okay, let's say you are a veteran living in a major metropolitan area. Maybe you live near a massive VA medical center in Florida or Texas. There might be a robust, fully staffed DAV office right there inside the hospital. You might walk in and find a service officer who has been doing this exact job for 20 years.
So they know the system inside and out.
They know every trick, every regulation. They know what the local judges look for. You are set. You get gold standard representation and you don't pay a dime.
And that's the winner of the geography lottery.
Right. But now let's say you live in rural Louisiana, or the panhandle of Texas, or upstate New York. Your quote-unquote local officer might be a county employee who handles everything from veterans benefits to issuing fishing licenses and dog tags.
Oh, wow. So they are completely split in their focus.
Or maybe the only help nearby is a well-meaning volunteer at the local VFW post who only comes in on Tuesdays from 10 knock in the morning to 2 knock in the afternoon.
And if you work a normal job during those hours, you're just out of luck.
Exactly. Or, and this is the really tricky part, the quality variance issue the sources highlight. You might get someone who has the time, but they are just incompetent.
Incompetent how? Because they passed the test, right?
I know they passed a baseline test, but the VA law is incredibly dense. It changes constantly based on court precedents. A volunteer who looks at one basic hearing loss claim a month is not going to have the same sharpness as a professional who looks at 10 complex claims a day. So you might go to the free accountant, to use your analogy, and he's a great guy if he offers you a cup of coffee. But he's never seen a tax return as complicated as yours before. And because he doesn't know the obscure rules, he misses a deduction that costs you $20,000.
In this case, he misses a secondary condition connection, like connecting your sleep apnea to your service-connected asthma. And that mistake costs you $20,000 in lost benefits over a few years.
Exactly. So the free store is either out of stock, closed when you desperately need it, or the product on the shelf is just highly inconsistent.
And as we know, nature abhors a vacuum. When you have a system that is that difficult to navigate and the free help is that inconsistent, a market will inevitably emerge to fill the gap.
That is the birth of the shadow industry.
But wait, it wasn't always this way, right? Looking at the research, it points to a very specific timeline. It seems like the floodgates only opened fairly recently. What happened?
The key year here is 2006. Before 2006, the law actually had teeth, real teeth. There were actual criminal and civil penalties for unauthorized representation.
So if I was a private consultant in 2005 and I put an ad in the paper saying, hey, pay me to help you with your VA claim, I was committing a crime?
Yes. You could go to federal prison or face incredibly heavy fines. The government protected its monopoly on representation very aggressively. They wanted to ensure that veterans were not being exploited by scam artists.
So what changed in 2006?
Congress literally just removed those penalties.
Why? That seems incredibly counterintuitive. If the goal of the government is to protect veterans, did they just wake up and decide exploitation was okay now?
The sources are honestly a bit hazy on the exact why. It's described as unclear in the legal analysis we reviewed. It might have been a careless oversight in a much larger legislative package, or it might have been a deliberate move to deregulate the space generally. But whatever the intent was, the effect was immediate and crystal clear.
The fence came down.
The electric fence was turned off. The sign saying, "Keep out," is still technically there. The law still explicitly says you cannot charge fees for initial claims unless you are accredited, and even then there are strict caps. But without the penalty provision, the law became entirely unenforced.
It's like posting a 60-mile-per-hour speed limit sign, but firing all the highway patrol officers and selling the radar guns.
Exactly. It became a rule without a consequence, and that created a massive legal void. Suddenly, private companies realized, hey, we can offer these services, we can charge good money for them, and technically no one is going to knock on our door and stop us.
And this is where the industry just exploded. We went from a system totally dominated by the VFW and the Davy to a system where today, if you Google VA claim help, you get hit with 1,000 targeted ads for private companies.
A multi-billion-dollar industry sprang up almost overnight.
But we need to be very careful with our terminology here as we dig into this. I think it's really easy to paint all these private actors with the exact same brush, but the research and, honestly, the listener feedback we've received on this topic really emphasizes that there are two very different business models operating in this shadow space.
That is a critical distinction. If you are a veteran listening to this or you're helping a veteran, you need to understand the fundamental difference between the claim sharks and the education companies. They operate entirely differently, they charge differently, and the risks to you are completely different.
Let's start with the sharks. Why do they get such a nasty nickname?
Because of their fee structure and their approach to controlling the veteran. The claim sharks, which are often technically operating under the name claims consulting companies, operate on a contingency basis.
Explain that for someone who doesn't speak lawyer.
Their pitch to the veteran is essentially, we will handle everything. Give us your passwords. We will file your claim. We will deal with the VA. We will source the doctor's notes. You just sit back on your couch and wait for the check to arrive in the mail.
Which, to be totally honest, sounds incredibly appealing if you are a veteran with severe PTSD who finds dealing with government bureaucracy triggering. If I'm anxious and completely overwhelmed, having someone confidently take the wheel sounds great.
It is very appealing. That's the hook. That is exactly how they get you. But the cost is substantial. They typically take a cut of your benefit increase.
Like a percentage of the total?
Yes. But the sources cite fee structures that are often 5 or 6 times the monthly increase they win for you.
Let's do the math on that so we really understand the financial impact on a veteran's life.
Okay, let's say a shark gets you an increase that bumps your monthly VA pay by $2,000. Maybe you go from being 50% disabled to 90% disabled. That is a life-changing amount of steady income. That covers your rent, your groceries, your car payments.
Right, it's huge.
But the shark's contract, which you signed on day one, says they get 6 times that monthly increase. So 6 times $2,000.
That's $12,000.
$12,000. And often they want that paid out very quickly. Usually when the VA finally grants a claim after months of waiting, they send a back paycheck. It's a lump sum covering all the months you were waiting for the decision. The shark will often demand that entire lump sum be handed over immediately.
So you win a claim, you finally get this big check that you were planning to use to pay off credit card debt or fix your leaking roof, and instead you have to hand the whole thing over to the consultant.
Correct. And remember, these companies are unaccredited. That means the VA does not regulate their fees whatsoever. If you used an accredited attorney for an appeal, which is totally legal and normal, the VA strictly caps their fees, usually at 20% of the back pay. With a shark, the sky is the limit because they are operating entirely outside the VA's jurisdiction.
Hence the word predatory.
Right. The widespread criticism is that they are siphoning off federal benefits that were specifically meant to feed and house disabled veterans just to pad their own corporate profits, all for doing administrative paperwork that could have been done for free down the street.
Okay, that's Group A, the sharks. High fees, percentage of future earnings. They take total control of the claim. Now let's look at Group B, the education companies. They strongly claim to be different. How?
Their entire legal defense, and honestly their whole business model, rests on the idea that they do not represent the veteran. They position themselves strictly as coaches or teachers.
So they don't actually file the claim for you?
No. They explicitly do not file the claim. They don't log into the veteran's VA account. They don't put the envelope in the mail. They don't make phone calls to the VA on your behalf.
And then what on earth are you paying them for if they don't do the work?
You are paying for intellectual capital. The philosophy is veteran empowerment. You are paying them to teach you how to analyze your own medical records. They teach you how to understand the VA's rating criteria, the Code of Federal Regulations. They teach you how to structure your own argument so it resonates with the rater.
It's the difference between hiring a chauffeur and hiring a driving instructor.
That's the perfect analogy. The shark is the chauffeur. They say, get in the back, I'll drive, just pay me a fortune when we get there. The education company is the driving instructor. They say, sit in the driver's seat. I'm going to sit next to you and teach you how to shift gears, how to merge onto the highway, and how to parallel park. But you are the one driving the car.
And I assume the fee structure is entirely different too.
Yes, very different. Usually it's a flat one-time upfront fee, maybe a few $100 or a couple $1,000 depending on the complexity of the medical evidence they are reviewing. But it's fixed. It is not a percentage of your future life earnings. If you get $1 million in benefits over your lifetime because of what they taught you, their fee doesn't go up a single cent.
And the source has mentioned something about guarantees with these companies.
Yes. Many of the reputable education companies offer a money-back guarantee. If you follow their coaching, you file the claim yourself, and you don't get a rating increase, they refund the upfront fee.
But here is the rub, and we can't ignore this. They are still unaccredited, right? Just like the sharks.
Correct. They are absolutely still operating in that regulatory gray area. But they argue they don't need accreditation because they aren't, quote-unquote, representing the veteran before the VA. They are just selling information. It's like buying a really expensive personalized book about how to file your taxes versus actually hiring an accountant to sign the return.
This leads us directly into the core philosophical debate here, which I think is just fascinating. It's accreditation versus capability. Because the government line, the strict VA line, is that only accredited people are safe. But the market is loudly saying accredited people aren't always effective.
That is the absolute crux of the issue. And to really understand why veterans feel that way, we have to look at what the sources call the newbie risk.
The newbie risk. Explain that.
Okay, imagine a newly accredited VSO officer. He's a great person. He genuinely wants to help vets. He took the required OGC course and he passed the written exam last week. He has the official stamp of approval. He has the accredited badge on his desk.
Okay, sounds good so far.
But he has never actually fought a complex claim in his life. He doesn't know the strategic nuances. Does he know exactly how to link sleep apnea to PTSD as a secondary condition? Does he know the specific medical literature needed to prove that link to a skeptical VA rater?
Maybe not. He knows which forms to use, but he doesn't know the strategy to win.
Exactly. Now compare him to a private consultant, maybe a shark, maybe a teacher, who has been doing this every single day for 15 years. They are not accredited. The VA says they are unauthorized. But they have seen 5,000 claims. They know exactly what phrasing the VA raters are looking for. They know that if you don't use the specific words prostrating attacks when describing your migraines, you are going to get a 0% rating even if you are in bed for 3 days a week.
It's book smarts versus street smarts.
Perfectly put. And if you are a veteran with a complex, highly nuanced condition, maybe something rare, or a secondary connection that requires a very tight medical argument, you might feel that the generalist at the local VSO office simply isn't equipped to fight your specific battle. You want the specialist, even if you have to pay out of pocket for it.
And this really feels like a massive failure of the concept of the gold standard. Because if accreditation doesn't actually guarantee competence, then what is it really guaranteeing to the veteran?
It guarantees oversight. That is the fundamental trade-off here. It guarantees that if the VSO screws up maliciously, there is a mechanism to punish them. With the private market, there is no government oversight. If a private consultant gives you terrible advice that permanently ruins your claim, you can't complain to the VA. You have to try and sue them in civil court, which is a whole other nightmare that costs thousands of dollars.
So there's this huge verification gap. The veteran is stuck between a rock and a hard place. The rock is a free system that might be incompetent or totally unavailable. The hard place is a paid system that might be predatory and has absolutely no oversight.
And that tension, that incredibly dangerous middle ground, is exactly why the state of Louisiana decided they had to step in.
This brings us to the news hook we teased at the beginning and the big legal showdown, the PLUS Act, Preserving Lawful Utilization of Services for Veterans Act. It sounds like a completely standard piece of state legislation. What was Louisiana actually created to do here?
Louisiana looked at this Wild West situation happening in their state and said, "We need some sheriffs in town." They acknowledged that the private industry exists, veterans are using it, and it isn't going away just because the VA frowns on it. So they tried to pass a law that would effectively legalize and regulate the private consulting industry at the state level.
So instead of trying to ban them, which wasn't working, they wanted to bring them into the light.
Yes, the idea was incredibly pragmatic. Let's make them register with the state of Louisiana. Let's cap their fees so they can't act like predatory sharks. Let's make sure they are totally transparent with their contracts. It was an attempt to put solid guardrails on the industry.
That sounds entirely reasonable. It sounds like basic common sense consumer protection.
It does sound reasonable. It sounds like a great solution to a messy real-world problem, but it ran headfirst into the United States Constitution.
Enter federal judge Brian In A. Jackson, he struck this law down entirely, and the reasons why are fascinating because they don't just kill the Louisiana law, they expose the deep flaws in the whole federal system. The first reason he gave is basically Civics 101, the Supremacy Clause.
Right. Article 6, Clause 2 of the Constitution. Basically, if the federal government has a comprehensive law about something, the states cannot come in and make up their own conflicting rules.
And the feds already have the accreditation system.
Correct. The judge ruled that Congress has already created a comprehensive federal scheme for who can represent veterans, a Title 38 accreditation system. By trying to create a parallel state system that legalizes unaccredited consultants, Louisiana was actively impeding the federal goal of ensuring veterans have qualified federally accredited representation.
So Louisiana cannot rewrite the rules for a federal agency. That makes total legal sense. But the second reason the judge gave is that this is the one that really caught my attention when I read the ruling, the First Amendment.
This is the absolute bombshell of the case. This is the part that every single listener needs to pay attention to. The PLUS Act had a specific requirement written into it. It said that any private consultant doing business in the state had to read a specific script to the veteran.
A mandatory disclosure.
Yes, they had to provide a verbal and a written statement right up front saying, quote, "The same services are available for free from the state or a VSO."
Again, that just sounds like a standard consumer warning, like saying, warning, you can get this medicine cheaper at the generic store. Why is that unconstitutional?
Because of the legal concept of compelled speech. The government generally cannot force a private citizen or business to say something unless it is purely factual and entirely uncontroversial.
And the judge looked at this and said this statement wasn't factual.
He did. The judge explicitly found that the statement, "The same services are available for free," lacked a, quote, "reasonable factual basis."
He basically called it a lie, a government-mandated lie.
Essentially, yes. He looked at the evidence, specifically regarding complex appeals and litigation. The sources point out that VSOs often literally cannot provide high-level legal services.
Explain that for me. What can a private specialized lawyer do that a VSO service officer cannot?
Well, let's say your claim is denied by the Board of Veterans' Appeals. Your next step is taking it to the Court of Appeals for Veterans Claims, the CAVC. That is a real federal court. It has federal judges, strict rules of evidence, oral arguments, the whole 9 yards.
It's not just filling out forms anymore, it's real litigation.
Exactly. And VSO service officers are generally not lawyers. They cannot litigate in federal court. So if your claim reaches that stage, you must hire a specialized attorney or an accredited agent who practices there. A VSO literally cannot help you at that level.
So if the state forces a specialized consultant or lawyer to say to a veteran, hey, you can get this exact same service for free from a volunteer at the VSO, the state is actively forcing them to lie to the consumer.
Exactly. And the judge said, you absolutely cannot compel a private business to mislead a consumer just to prop up the state's preferred free option.
That is a damning indictment of the free system. A federal judge effectively ruled on the record that the free system is not always equivalent to the private market.
It completely validates the core argument of the private industry. It confirms that there are massive gap services that the VSOs simply are not providing or cannot provide. It confirms that the private market offers a product, whether it's legal expertise in appeals or a specific medical strategy for initial claims, that the free store just does not stock.
So the PLUS Act is dead. The guardrails in Louisiana are gone. Where does that leave us nationally?
We are right back to the status quo. The federal law banning fees for initial claims is still technically on the books, but still completely unenforced. The sharks are still swimming and taking massive cuts. The teachers are still teaching for flat fees. And the veterans are still stuck in the middle, completely confused.
It seems like the abundance problem we talked about earlier is the real root cause here. We can sit here and talk about laws and regulations and court rulings all day long, but isn't this really just a basic supply issue?
It is entirely a supply issue. If the government genuinely wants to kill the shadow industry, they don't need more laws banning it. They need to outcompete it.
Economics 101.
If every single time a veteran walked into a VSO office, they were met immediately by a highly trained, highly motivated expert who had the time and the resources to handle their claim perfectly from start to finish, nobody would ever pay a shark $12,000.
The market for sharks only exists because the free alternative is failing to meet the demand.
Exactly. The existence of the private industry is just a symptom. It is a glaring symptom of the government's failure to provide adequate, free, accredited representation in the abundance that is actually needed.
So let's try to be incredibly practical for a minute. We have listeners who are veterans or who are spouses trying to help their veterans.
Yeah.
If you are staring at a denial letter from the VA right now, or you're about to file for the very first time, how do you navigate this maze? Because the sources give us a sort of choice matrix to follow.
They do. And step 1 of that matrix is simple. Give the system a chance.
Go to the free guys first, always.
Yes. Go to your county service officer. Go to the VFW. Go to the DAV, especially the DAV, given their specific focus on claims. It is free. It is the congressionally chartered standard. And remember, many of these officers are excellent. You might find that rock star who gets it done perfectly.
But the key is, don't just blindly trust the patch on their shoulder.
No, absolutely not. Treat it exactly like a job interview. You are hiring them to handle your future. even if you aren't paying them out of pocket. Ask them hard questions. Say, how long have you been doing this? Have you won claims for traumatic brain injury before? What is your specific medical strategy for my back injury?
And if they give you a blank stare, or if they just say, oh, just file the form and we'll see what the VA says,
Then you walk away. You are not obligated to use the very first VSO you meet. You can shop around within the free system, you can drive to the next county over, you can call a different organization.
okay, but let's say you've struck out. The local VSO is completely overwhelmed, or maybe you've been denied twice already and you just need a fresh set of eyes on your file. Now you are seriously looking at the private market. What is step 2?
Step 2 is clearly distinguishing the model. You need to know exactly what you are buying. Are you hiring a shark or are you hiring a teacher?
And that really comes down to control, right?
It does. If a company says, just sign here, give us your e-benefits login info, and we'll take 20% of your check for the next year, that is a shark. You are handing over total control of your claim and a massive amount of your future equity.
And if they say, pay us $500 up front and we will sit down and teach you how to write a compelling personal statement and review your records?
Uh-huh.
That's a teacher.
Right. The risk profile is completely different. With the teacher, your financial risk is capped at that one-time upfront fee. With the shark, your risk is a significant ongoing portion of your financial future.
There is one more very practical piece of the puzzle I want to touch on from the source's medical evidence, because we've talked about the legal side, but the sources specifically mention DBQs. What exactly is a DBQ and why does it matter so much in this process?
This is huge. DBQ stands for Disability Benefits Questionnaire. It is the form. It is the specific checklist that the doctor fills out to tell the VA exactly how bad your condition is. It literally matches your physical symptoms to the VA's rating criteria.
So if the doctor checks box A, I get 30%. If they check box B, I get 50%.
It is almost that mechanical, yes. The DBQ is the true currency of the claim. You can have the best lawyer in the world writing a beautiful brief. But if the medical evidence, the DBQ, doesn't explicitly support the rating criteria, you will lose.
So where do you get one of these golden tickets?
Ideally, your assigned VA doctor fills it out during your appointment, but the sources hint at a major systemic problem here. VA doctors are often told by administration not to fill them out, or they are just way too busy actively treating patients to do hours of administrative paperwork for claims.
So you have the actual injury, it's documented in your chart, but you can't get the specific form filled out to prove it to the rater.
And this is exactly where the education companies often point veterans to outside help. They might say, look, we don't provide medical opinions, we can't fill this out for you, but here is a network of private doctors, like American Medical Experts is one specifically mentioned in the source material, who actually know how to properly evaluate you and fill out these specific VA forms.
But wait, is that legal? Can I just pay a private doctor to fill out a government VA form?
Absolutely. It is your absolute right to submit independent medical evidence from a private provider. There is nothing shady about getting a second opinion or paying a specialist to review your file. But again, transparency is key here. You want an honest, objective medical evaluation based on the facts. You are paying for their time and their diagnostic expertise. You are not buying a guaranteed diagnosis.
So if a company promises you a specific rating, if they say, hey, pay us $2,000 and we guarantee our doctor will get you a 100% rating, run away.
Run away as fast as you can. That is fraud. No legitimate medical professional or consultant can ever guarantee a specific rating outcome.
So at the end of the day, the veteran really has to become their own project manager. They have to actively manage the VSO or manage the private consultant and manage the doctors.
They have to be the driver of the ship, as the source put it. You cannot be a passive passenger in your own VA claim. You have to care more about your claim than anyone else does because nobody else has to live with the financial consequences.
It's an incredibly heavy burden for someone who, by definition, is already dealing with a physical or mental disability.
It is profoundly unfair, but it is the stark reality of the current system.
Let's zoom out as we wrap up this deep dive. We've looked at the history, the 2006 rule change, the broken laws, the Louisiana court case. What is the big synthesis here?
I think the real synthesis is that we are in a transition period that isn't actually transitioning anywhere. We are just stuck. The federal government refuses to enforce the ban on private consultants, but they also refuse to officially regulate them to make them safe. And at the same time, The government refuses to fund the free system enough to make the consultants obsolete.
It's a complete stalemate.
Yeah,
And the veteran is just the pawn caught in the middle.
exactly. The veteran is left navigating a maze where the exit constantly moves and the guides offering to help might actually be predators.
I keep coming back to that provocative thought you mentioned earlier. The market doesn't lie.
It really doesn't. If the free system provided by Congress was truly sufficient, if it was fast, if it was highly accurate, and if it was universally available to every veteran who needed it, the market for $12,000 consulting fees would evaporate overnight. You wouldn't be able to sell bottled water by the river if the river was clean and easy to reach.
That is an incredibly powerful image. The mere fact that veterans are willing to pay these massive life-altering fees is the strongest possible indictment of the current free system.
It is a massive vote of no confidence in the standard VSO process, and it's being paid for in cold, hard cash.
Well, that is definitely a heavy note to end on, but a vital one. It's something to really mull over. If the system is so broken that veterans are voluntarily giving up huge chunks of their compensation just to get through the door, what does that say about how we treat our injured workers after they come home?
It's a question we need to keep asking.
Absolutely. If you are a veteran navigating this right now, do your homework, check the accreditation status of whoever you're working with, read every single line of the contract, and know exactly what you are signing away.
Knowledge is your absolute best weapon here. Stay skeptical and stay engaged.
Thanks for diving deep with us today. We will see you all next time.
Take care.
If you found this video helpful, please consider donating to helpallvets.org. Thank you.